context, of course, it's the UN meetings that are starting tomorrow formally, but tonight already everybody's here, and Trump is going to be here. And this, I feel, are probably among the most important meetings of the UN because of everything that has happened, and the paradigm that has changed, and the Pax Americana that doesn't exist any longer, and Europe that is trying to have a role, but it's finding it hard to then really prove that that role is important. The United States that is withdrawing and full of surprises every day, and I don't know if you've seen yesterday the funeral, the eulogy of Charlie Kirk in Arizona, but it was an amazing demonstration on how Christian evangelism is coming back in this party, and how clearly Trump is trying to reach out to prepare for the next elections of the midterm that are a little bit more than a year from today. We've seen China that is trying to come in and take the leading role in coordinating a multilateral system. It is very bizarre that China becomes the sort of the guarantor of an international order. We were hoping to have peace in the Ukraine in 24 hours, and nothing has happened. And somehow Putin has managed to humiliate Trump, but Trump didn't react to this counterattack. So just recently, in these past few days, yesterday in fact, the UK and Australia and Canada has recognized the Palestinian state, creating again lots of confusion among the allies that were resisting to have a better situation to do it. So everything is happening, and I think that we're very lucky to have Geordie Greig with us because he is a seasoned journalist. He's been the editor of the Daily Mail, which is the most important newspaper in England. And while at the Daily Mail, he ran a campaign that was against Brexit, so one of the few English that considered that then they lost, but the Brexit then came in. But I want to commend him for that, because he proved to be right in the end. I mean, it was we all know that then it was a mistake. He's been a journalist for all of his life. He was in New York as a correspondent. We met way back then. In 1999, he joined Tatler, where he became editor. Tatler is a bit like Vanity Fair, just to make a comparison. Am I right, Geordie? It's much better than Vanity Fair. Yes.
The oldest magazine in the world.
The oldest magazine in the world. So there we go. And so he knows everything also about social things that are happening in England, not just in London. 2018 appointed editor of the Daily Mail, and under his leadership became the best-selling daily newspaper in England. And then he became the editor-in-chief of The Independent, where he still is, and he has done an amazing job in consolidating the digital expansion, and you will tell us about it and what's your secret. Geordie tells us that now the Independent is the best-selling digital newspaper in England, or more? More? Yeah.
More,
Louder. Now, we have here with us, Stephen Dunbar-Johnson, who's the president of the New York Times International. As you know, the New York Times has done pretty well with digital printing, so maybe we'll compare notes and see who's doing better. But anyway, it's amazing what Geordie has done. He's very creative. He's fantastic in the way he manages the newspaper. He loves scoops, and I'm not going to waste any more time in praising his glories. But I'm still in the mood of yesterday, of course. You know, the religions things. Geordie, would you make us the favor? I would like to start. I mean,
can I start with a correction?
Of course. Geordie loves to humiliate me.
First of all, thank you all for tolerating me being here. I was actually ambushed and hijacked by Mario. I very innocently rang him up and said, can I come and have dinner with you and his daughter, who is my goddaughter, And he said, yes, but. You are the but. So he then sends out an invitation which suggests that I'm going to be an expert on the EU, on the US, on the UK, on AI. It's about 3 in the morning for me, and I'm expected to talk coherently. Thank you, Mario, very, very much indeed.
Yeah. To be fair, I asked, I said, are you an expert on AI? I said, of course, I mean, you know. and let me ask you something, what about the situation in Ukraine? Oh my God, I know intimately Russia and Moscow. And so I was reassured.
No, I was brought up on a farm where AI was artificial insemination. So different things we thought we were talking about.
Anyway, having set the stage for this very important...
But the correction.
The correction, sorry, yes, the correction.
I did not back Brexit as the editor of the Daily Mail. I backed
The
Brexit
Sunday,
as the Mail on Sunday.
Mail on
So
Sunday, yes.
I only have 1 day a week and fought a fierce and fearless campaign to try and persuade Britain about remaining. And the Daily Mail ran an even fiercer and vehement campaign about Brexit. And I think we are still in the territory of what I call not long COVID, but long Brexit, where the aftermath and the effects of the debate in Britain and the debate in Europe is still about the fundamentals of where we all stand in terms of sovereignty, in terms of trade, in terms of friendship, in terms of communication, in terms of partnerships. And I think that was a pivotal moment. We like to describe it in Britain as it was the Civil War without muskets.
So excuse me a second, so Geordie also made the conditions as Mario. I do both the questions and the answers. So here we go.
We will come to you in a minute. I think everyone is very grateful that you're here and that you pay a certain contribution to tonight, but not too much. Mario.
So, but hold on, let me interrupt you because we'll go to Brexit. I'd like to start with something that I know that it's in the heart and the minds, on the top of the list. You know, forget the Ukraine, forget that you have been the editor of Tatler, you know everything about what's happening in England. Tell us something about the royal dinner with President Trump. How did it really go? What kind of little tidbit can you tell us about it?
Well, as it was mainly populated by American businessmen, probably the answer is closer here than there. I mean, I've never known so many billionaires outshine a glittering royal banquet. It was quite extraordinary how Trump had captured the way in which our diplomacy is normally handled, and it was it a triumph for him or was it a triumph for us? You know, we boast we got 150 billion worth of business. He boasts he got a royal carriage and proximity to royals, and it was a bit of a trade-off. Did we gain much? I'm not sure we gained a huge amount in the end, but did we lose out? And the answer was no. And the problem with Trump, you're either a winner or you're a loser if you're on the other side of him in a room. So have we lost out compared to the rest of Europe? Probably not. But have we got, you know, it's a question of show us the money or give us the treaty. And you know, he did show us a bit of money, but I'm not sure we got any guarantees which put us in a permanence of being in a better position. My favourite moment of the whole thing was when our erstwhile American ambassador, who was famously filmed in the Oval Office holding hands with Trump, as Trump murmured, "You've got a lovely accent," almost as if he was wooing a young girl, and then to say, actually at the press office at Windsor Castle, I don't actually know him, was, I mean, almost a put down on a scale which leaves Mandelson not only a friend of a former paedophile, but friendless with the president. So, I mean, the ruthlessness of the whole interaction with Trump from a British point of view through that small prism of Peter Mandelson was completely riveting to us. But as he, boasted again of 7 wars having been brought to peace, and then opened up the possibility of invading Afghanistan, he's not dull. I mean, you do have the most astonishing president in the last century, whether one loves him, hates him, admires him, detests him. Most people are unchangeable in their view about it. It was a bit like Brexit. There was almost no point during Brexit having arguments, because the vehemence of people's attitude was not going to be moved. And it's the same here, as we see and we await an election, which we will see whether he comes through again.
I'd like to stay on what you mentioned about the UK ambassador that was forced to resign because of Epstein. As you know, the Epstein story is a huge story here, and Trump seems, to have some issues and wants to avoid it as much as he can. So, do you think that it was fair that he was let go, your ambassador? I mean,
well, he was fired.
He was fired, exactly. He was
and completely correctly.
Completely correctly. And
Mary,
what do you think? You know very well the Epstein story. So, what do you think that the connection with Trump is? Can you tell us something about it?
Let's deal with your first question
Yes.
first. So, how can any country have as the representative someone who tried to help a convicted paedophile get their sentence quashed? How can you stand up and represent the values of a country for valor, for decency, for respectability, for a reputation worth keeping, if you are judged, if you're not going to be judged by defending probably the most egregious predator of young girls in the last 100 years. So he did talk himself out of a job, but Mandelson has always talked himself out of a job. It's the 3rd time he's been fired. It's the 3rd time he's gone down temptation alley and found things, normally glittering, normally to do with cash, which have made him utterly unhireable. And I think he's now gone into a position where he's not just unhireable, he's uninvitable. I mean, it is completely astonishing, the rise and fall, but every sign was there with him. From the association with Epstein to him, I mean, those emails where he's wheedlingly asks for an airfare in order to go to his island is an illustration that he is biddable by money, buyable by anyone who's got a wallet, and also indiscernible to whether people are good, bad, or different. I always think with businesses, it's easy, and I speak rather freely in front of an extraordinary selection of business people here, but I always think money is quite easy to get. Good money is difficult to get. Money where you have trust, authority, decency, support, all the things which you want money to bring, rather than being rapacious, movable, fluid, and not necessarily a force for good. Money needs to be a force for good.
So, and do you think that he was confused in that because there was Prince Andrew, the relationship with them back then? I mean, it's easy for us to condemn in retrospective, but from looking at now from before.
But Mary, are you defending him?
No, I'm not defending him. I'm asking
you.
Just asking. I'm asking you how wide was the and more importantly, what do you think the problem may be with President Trump? Because this is what everybody is interested in also.
Well,
did he go to the island? Do we know? We don't know. We could do some questions off the record, of course.
let me tell you when I met Trump. Okay, so I met Trump for my one and only time in meeting Trump, and it's got a sort of connection with people and choices and judgment. So I went to interview Trump in 1993 in Trump Tower, when he was essentially going bankrupt. And so up those gold escalators, up into the glittering chamber, dazzled by the chandeliers, and there was the man himself, funny, charismatic, confident, and it gives good interview. So at the end of the interview, which he thinks has gone rather well, don't forget Prince Andrew thought his TV interview with the BBC went rather well too. He said, "What are you doing tonight?" And I said, "Not much." And he said, "Have you got a girlfriend?" And I said, "Actually, I do." This is before my daughter is here, so this is before I got married.
I know the story.
And so he says, "Okay, meet me at the helipad." So I go, "Okay." So 6 o'clock we go to the helipad, and I introduce him to my girlfriend. Donald, meet Ivana. You're kidding. Donald, please say hello to Ivana. There is not only one Ivana in the whole world. You do not have copyright over the name or the personage who is called Ivana. Okay. So Ivana and Donald and I, plus 4 Koreans, and yeah, that was it. We fly to Atlantic City. We have dinner, and then we go through the slot machine alleyways. It's a bit like being with a mixture of, John Gotti meets Elvis Presley. He's full of bombast and charm, and anyway, he drops his bag at the end of the evening. And I write my article, and I'm working for the London Sunday Times. On the Sunday, obviously the article comes out. Monday morning, I'm living in Bleecker Street between 6th and 7th. There's a knock on the downstairs door, so I go down my 3 flights of stairs, and there is a courier. Hands me an envelope. I go, open it. The first thing I recognise, having opened it, is the barbed wire signature of Donald Trump. Dear Geordie, I'm normally a good judge of character. I can't believe that you talked to bankers who've said what they've said about me. And then in 1993, he accuses me of fake news. 1993. Of course, the Courier was then the equivalent of a tweet. So really, nothing's changed. So how does this relate to Epstein? It only relates in that he was not always, he was pretty careless who he saw, but he doesn't drink, so he's not going to do something totally stupid or blameworthy or bad. But he and Epstein clearly saw each other. I did think he went to the island, but there's no evidence, and I think it would have come out. And there's no evidence that he did anything which was illegal. It's just the stink and the toxicity of anyone close to Epstein. I mean, the story broke in the English papers on Sunday that Prince Andrew's ex-wife had apologised and said she would never see Epstein ever again. He'd lent her $15,000. And after that, she then wrote to Epstein. These emails have now been leaked, where she apologises for having denied him. Her story is that she did that in order to stop him going after her and her children and trying to bankrupt them through a libel suit. So the tactics of Trump and Epstein are not that far different. in terms of money, using the law as a sledgehammer, and trying to smash your way into getting influence. And there comes a point when any tactic will work and anything will suffice. I mean, if you think, at the moment with Trump, we've got the federal prosecutor, Seibert, dismissed. We've got the Wall Street Journal censored and sued. We've got the comedian cancelled. And we've got the country worried by all those tactics, which are ones of attack and personal animosity, with a curtailment of any belief in law on a scale which is unprecedented. I mean, it makes Nixon seem slightly on the innocent side in terms of manipulating governance, law, every structure of trust and authority and hope and belief is being challenged in such a way and taken over it's difficult not to come back to adjectives which are almost cartoonish. I mean, there is a gangsterish element. And I think the papers, I hail the New York Times for standing up and being absolutely dogged and decent and following the story and seeming fearless. We've got the Wall Street Journal, which is a complicated relationship with Trump because of Murdoch, being sued for $15 billion. And the thing about this climate of using money and the law is very few companies can sustain even the pre-war, let alone the legal action in court, because the costs are so enormous and the publicity is so ever increasing in its, you waste time. Time is money. Any business who's caught up in legal action knows that you spend too much time on it. It saps your judgment, your cash, your resources, your people, and it's a war. And most people don't like being at war and try and avoid war and try and keep a straight back to play information in a way which was always seen as decent, honourable. I've been a journalist since, so long that my first paper we had hot metal. So literally we printed on hot metal, and the unions were in charge of the way papers were run financially, in terms of hirings. And I remember being in the compositors' room where the lead letters were placed, and I was about to move literally a comma less than half a centimetre, and a guy leapt over my shoulder and said, "Sonny, if you even touch that, we are all out on strike." So that stranglehold on the press went, and it's terrifying that there is a new stranglehold, which is the law, which is, and it's beyond important that people support the media, buy digitally or paper copies, in order that we keep that essential pillar of democracy, key pillar of free media. Every revolution which takes place, what's the first place that goes? Normally the TV studio. What's the first action which precedes that? The arrest of journalists. And one's seen that in Ukraine. We see wherever there is an element of forces which do not want to allow the freedom for the people to get information.
Thank you, Geordie. That was a great insight, especially, you must feel a great deal of pressure also in editing every day a newspaper. Did you receive any other letters from Trump or threat between then and now, or not yet?
I think
maybe after this conversation something will happen.
I think I blew it.
So quickly to close that, but just one last question, with a very quick answer. Why King Charles accepted to do that? I mean, King Charles didn't like Trump. He was very upset when the Queen had a state dinner way back then. So is it because the $150 billion of agreements, because the Prime Minister insisted, because he changed his mind?
Okay, one can turn politics into personalities, or one can turn politics into principles and structural necessity. America is our closest ally and our strongest ally and our most important ally. Trump will be, in 3 years' time, 3.5 years' time, gone. The influence may be continued. As heads of state, you deal with what is best for your country. And for us not to put our best foot forward, I think would have been foolish, and not to be conciliatory to the position of presidency rather than personality is what a mature democracy does. And there have been far worse people who have been entertained by the royal family, including the late Queen, Ceausescu for one. Chinese leaders, Russian leaders.
Okay, so he did it. So let's move to the last Britain subject. The fact that your Prime Minister announced with Australia and Canada the recognition of a Palestinian state. That has been a very controversial decision. People claim, there is still a war. Palestinian state does not exist. So would you recognize the principle, the idea? On one hand, you have Gaza under Hamas still that doesn't surrender. On the other hand, you have an aging leader for the PLO and so on and so forth. So why did he do it? Because he felt it was part of his more liberal position as a prime minister, coming from the left, because he felt there was the public opinion, because there is an important Muslim population in the UK. Do you think it was a good decision or a bad decision?
Well, first of all, let's go back to what is the trigger point for this 2 to 3 year episode in the Middle East, which was this terrible massacre created by Hamas. And let's not forget the hostages still held and the absolutely abhorrent torture, imprisonment, kidnap, rape, which took place. At that point, Israel was totally favoured and held in the deepest sympathy and collegiate thoughts by most of the world. Since that time, people, I think, have made a distinction between Netanyahu and Israel. The principle of Israel is difficult not to want to support. It's the only democratic country in the Middle East. It's built out of a history of the Holocaust and a history going onto many hundreds and thousands of years further back, with a very complicated relationship with those strips of land nearby. With what happened in Gaza over the last 2 years, I think public opinion changed. I think there was an absolute abhorrence against the slaughter, starvation, and relentless barrage which hit Gaza. And the arguments are very understandable. Israel feels you've got neighbours who want to obliterate them, and the wider picture is that you've got desperate women, children, hospitals, barely a school survives, which are under relentless attack. And I mean, the tragedy of it is really what's
but
moved us all.
forgive
So
me,
to come
forgive me,
to
yeah.
come to the political knot which you want me to untie. Internally in Britain, Labour, Keir Starmer's party, has a large Muslim sector of voters, and a cynical view would be that he is thinking of what his constituency will be weighing up their minds as to votes. And he's got a Labour Party conference next week where he doesn't want a huge march of people acting against him over Gaza. I don't think it's as cynical as that. And I think he's in this time of tyrannical leaders, he's almost a refreshing alternate as the sober, legal-minded, cautious, middle-of-the-road leader. I get bombarded by both sides, each claiming righteousness and abhorrence against either side. I think what Canada and Australia and Britain done is not wrong, but I think it leaves all of us with that terrible reservation: is Hamas being rewarded? And not a completely fair comparison, but when the IRA were at war with mainland Britain, and my father's offices were blown up twice, there was a sense where one had to divide the IRA from Ireland and the Irish. And people were so angry as soldiers were blown up, Lord Mountbatten was blown up, shops like Harrods were blown up. There was an attempt to assassinate our Prime Minister. That conflagration of confusion between personalities and principles again is where you have to keep very sober in order to make sure that you are trying to find an equilibrium in a world of chaos. So the choice of making peace with the IRA was very, very complicated for us. In the same way, but it did make progress, and it did lead to a degree of peace, not total peace, but a huge degree of peace. So is this a move which will help that? Let's hope so.
So let's move to Europe and the role of England in Europe. I mean, unfortunately, Brexit won. Everybody now seems to regret the outcome of the vote.
But I'm going to stop you there, Mario,
Yes.
because as a Democrat and as a fervent Remainer, I'm more of a Democrat than a Remainer. And there was a vote, and I accepted. And
But was the vote polluted by Russian influence, as many people say? Was a mistake in posing the question because Cameron really wanted to stay, etc., etc.?
But there are many what-ifs and conspiracy theories which you can entangle this with. But if you believe in democracy, and we see ourselves in the UK as a very strong and long democracy, you have to accept it. If you start to do what Trump did...
No. Of course, we accepted it, the vote came in, but I'm saying now England has suffered, and some people are saying, well, maybe we made a mistake in voting in that way. So how do you see the future?
But you are colouring it through a shared view we had. But if one turns that into an eternal prejudice, we're never going to get to a better relationship with our fellow Europeans. And what's key is that we do alter them to think about us as unantagonistic, and that we think of them are the ways in which we can further friendship, trade, exchange of visa controls. It's really important that this huge continent does unite. We've never had so much instability with the blocs of China, Russia, and who knows what's going to happen with other nuclear wars in little bits of the Middle East. So unity for us, and I think the Labour government, which I backed, the Independent Pact, is doing everything it can to try to find ways. There's not going to immediately be a single market. There's not easily going to be a customs rules exchange, but there will be increasing trust and friendship and partnerships. I mean, at the moment, if I fly into Switzerland, there's an empty queue where every European can go in, and normally it is empty. And then there's the long, sneaking British queue. It's totally unproductive to Switzerland, totally infuriating for us. And as people get across and reach the border control person, they say, well, it is your fault. Possibly.
Okay, I'm going to have a last question, and then I'll open up to the public. Time is running very quickly, so we don't have much time left. But Ukraine, Russia, you know Russia, you had relationship with important Russians. So what do you think is going on in Putin's mind when he threatens even Poland and Lithuania and so on and so forth? Is he really push it into outside of the boundaries of Russia, Ukraine, and why Trump has not succeeded, and what goes on in Trump's mind, do you think, when he accepts that Putin takes him for a ride?
Well, I think I come back to quite simple basics with Putin. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely is the mantra, and I think Trump has been out-trumped by Putin in his cunning, his dishonesty, his ability to cement himself into power, to get rid of any obstacles to that. And I think Trump is just another temporary game to play. It's a very depressing scenario where so many lives have been lost, and it's almost seemed like a game. If you can end 8 wars rather than 7 wars, rather than to engage in a more realistic way of dealing with Putin. The only thing which tyrants understand is force and force of will. And I think the art of the deal may finally met its end game in Moscow. I think it would be very depressing if America turns itself more internally rather than externally in being a force for good throughout the world. I mean, in my lifetime, America's been done some incredibly great things. The last century, the 2 world wars would not have been won without America. The sense of that American aid all over Africa, other countries where survival, education, medicine, and a sense of belief in democratic values was one of the great standards. I'm married to America, my children are American as well as British, and I have a huge, more than a fondness, I have a great closeness and admiration of America. And it's sad to see many of the structures which brought that decency, which was translated by law, translated by politics, is at risk of being dismantled and destroyed. And when I was the editor of the Daily Mail, I fought very with huge combat against the Boris Johnson government, because he threatened to undermine part of the parliamentary processes, part of the complete authority that was imbued in our politics and our law, which is surprisingly easy to dislodge or dismantle or weaken unless it's stopped. And that's why, again, I come back to why the media is incredibly important. And when Trump cries fake news, it's a cry of, I used to hope it was a cry of impotence, but actually the difficulty is, the power of repetition with politicians is more than just an echo. It can become a mantra of belief for so many people, and it's just got to keep going. Holding the powerful their feet to the fire, shining lights in places where powerful people don't want it to be shone. The old adage was the media is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. That's not a bad principle to pursue.
Okay, let's open to the public. Any questions? Here we go. I cannot see you. Oh yes, of course, Chris Arshan.
Shout loudly.
Thanks very much. Very interesting. Just one quick follow-up on the Palestinian issue. As Mario said, there is no state to recognize, and yet the three countries recognize the state of Palestine. I'm just curious as to what, in your view, you seem to be supportive of it generally, what you think the practical positive implications of the announcement could be, particularly given, like, in the immediate wake, we've had 3 Palestinians executed by Hamas, and who were either working for the Israelis or were dissidents, and some we don't really know all the details, but they're executed publicly. And then, of course, Abbas himself has turned around and sued the UK for $2 trillion in reparations for the time that the UK occupied Palestine. So I'm just wondering what in your view could positively come out of this announcement?
Well, early days. This is 24 hours or 48 hours since it was announced, even though it was presaged in advance. I think anything which gives a dislodging to a preformed structure can springboard unforeseen changes. I think it was done out of a sense of the forlorn treatment of that area by a particular leader in order to try and give some strength to that area. Now, I'm talking in quite simple generalities because we haven't got a lot of time. But there will always be an argument which you'll be able to find why it's not a good thing. And there will always be those, and that's Australia and Canada and the UK, we will find that the reason to try and give hope to two states is to recognise a state in order that there can be two states. That's the simple reason, isn't it? So if you can't recognise a state, it's difficult to have two states.
Any other questions? Yes,
Christian Sevens.
Christian. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask, how do you interpret the fact that Murdoch is going to be part of the TikTok, the new American TikTok, when at the same time he's being sued by Trump for 15 billion because of what
So you think Trump's logical?
No, I just wonder whether they've done some deal.
Oh, it's almost impossible to think there hasn't been some sort of deal, whether it was a whispered conversation of a future gain, but we have no evidence of it. If in some ways Trump always tells us what he's going to do, and he didn't want Chinese to own it. He wanted Americans to own it. So he's got leverage on a lot of people, and that leverage can turn to advantage with Murdoch or others. I mean, TikTok is probably the most influential platform, particularly for the young. So why wouldn't Rupert want it? And also, why wouldn't Trump want Murdoch to own it? As the most potent force for MAGA is probably Fox News. So I mean, there are lots of reasons why there's a pragmatism as well as politics, and as ever, there's probably a lot of lack of principle.
And also maybe the 15 billion is, one of those things that just wants to hit the headlines, and and then in the end Trump is, as you say, is a pragmatic guy and finds always the way of the deal. Last question, John Calvelli.
Also, if you were Murdoch, why wouldn't you want to do age 94 or 95, the last big deal of your life?
No, I can see Murdoch's point of view, of course. That's the easy thing. Why Trump would give him a present as it
I think Trump is quite good at seeing, I'm fighting someone for this particular reason, but I'm going to have them at my table for another reason. Hence, Murdoch was at the Royal Banquet. I think if Trump had really not wanted him there, Trump stopped the Mayor of London being at the dinner, said he can't. So, and you had this gerontocracy of billionaires who all turned up. So, if you are the most powerful man in the world, you do have a little bit of power.
Okay, John, I'm sorry, last question because we have 1 minute, so really, John.
So
go
let
ahead.
me ask you a very easy question. With a foot in both worlds, US and UK, and your perception of politics and your ability to kind of understand the American system, I'm just curious from your perspective, how do you see the changes in the coalitions of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party? And how do you see that playing out over the next 2 to 4 years? In 1 minute or less.
Well, the only thing I'd say, never underestimate Trump and his influence over the Republicans and his influence over the economy in mid-America. And also, I don't think there's anyone in this room who would, whether you're going to vote Democrat or Republican, I sense most of you are Democrats, who would not want the Democratic Party to get their act together, find a decent, inspiring leader who was going to, capture the imagination and the electorate of America, because it's been degraded and depressing for such a long time to have leaders who are unelectable, and it seems so obvious from our comfortable armchairs in Europe that that's the case. But it's quite easy to look across the other side and see that we haven't had the most auspicious leaders. It's Truss for one, Boris for another. So I think leadership is a tremendously difficult thing to find in politics, because your personal reputation gets smashed and smashed and the financial rewards, particularly in the UK, where an MP is paid less than a very high-powered PA in the city. So the temptation for people to do things which get them money which aren't necessarily popular with the electorate is there are too many temptations, and yet no politician in Britain would dare vote for politicians to be paid a decent wage, or because they're so derided by the public. So it's an eternal figure of 8 going nowhere. But honestly, I think we all wish for the democracy. I know you're heavily involved. You know, we wish for inspiration, for strength, for credibility. You know, but would JFK have been the answer today? Who knows? That great womanizer, that great idealist. Which side of him would have been the most noted in this 24-hour social media rinsed world where, you know, people get chucked out for peccadillos which previously were hidden?
Okay, well, thank you all for being here, and especially thank you for Geordie. We close on a note of hope that in the future something may happen that change the current scenario that seems to be sort of petrified around the Republican Party who's dominating. And we'll see. John, maybe next time you'll come and be our guest speaker and you can illuminate us on what is happening.
I don't know how much illumination there will be.
Anyway, but we want in front of everybody a commitment that you will be in the future one of our guests. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.